Okay. Let's see here. All right. Yeah. Bibbidi bop boo bam. Let me just catch up on chat real quick. I'm just finishing eating real quick. Oh, cool. I see we got some good chats going here. Bacon. Kyle responding. I'm eating some like soy chicken nuggets from Morningstar. Uh, yeah, I don't know if you've ever had them. They're really good. They don't taste like, you know, like chicken nuggets, but they're really good. All right. Yeah, they're like, meat alternative. Where is around here that you don't have soy options? I mean, these you just find in the grocery store, like in the frozen section. Cool. So I have Frank. All right, let's. I mean, not Frank. Raph. Going back to. I'm back. Look who it is. It's me. So, what was I saying before? This is the 5 year. We're celebrating the 5 year anniversary of the Clockwork Game Design Podcast. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Those Morningstar, the green bags. They're good. Okay. Yeah, they're mostly soy, I think. Anyway, we're celebrating the 5 year anniversary of the Clockwork Game Design Podcast, which started in October, actually, of 2015. And yeah, what's it called? We've had many great guests over the years, one of which is Raph Koster, who is going to be coming on the show momentarily. My goal with Raph is I really want to talk about simulationist RPGs, which is something I've been talking about and thinking about a lot recently. Yeah, let's see if we can get him in here. Yeah. So Raph also made Ultima Online, which I have so much to talk about, but I feel like he's probably tired of talking about it. But yeah, so here we go. Starting our voice call. Oh, we could do video or. Hey, Raph, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, it's good to talk to you. Oh, we got video. Okay, cool. I'm gonna pop out. Go. Loop. Nice. You got a nice looking setup there.
Oh, thanks.
I like all the guitars in the background. You'll have to tell me about some of them.
Sure.
I don't know if I knew you were a musician. I knew you were a poet, but looks like you got quite a little music set up in there.
Uh, yes. Let's see. Besides what you see there, there's
Whoa.
also all of these.
Oh my
And you can see
goodness.
I've actually got my little recording set up there.
Nice.
And actually there's more down there.
Very
So
cool.
it's quite a bunch of music stuff.
What kind of
When
what kind of
I was back in college, I actually studied music theory and composition
Oh,
alongside my creative writing degree and actually studio art too. I did that too.
you,
So yeah,
you know
studied a
that
little
was
bit
what
of
I
everything.
studied. I studied music theory composition in college, my first time around anyway. As well. So that must be why we get along so good.
Maybe.
That's cool. What kind of music do you make? Do you make video game music at all?
I have made video game music. I did probably people on the stream never played any of the Facebook games I worked on. but I did with our team at MetaPlace. We did a couple of Facebook games, Island Life, and the second one was called My Vineyard. And I
Hmm.
actually did the piano soundtrack that was on My Vineyard. Um, long, long, long ago, if you played Ultima 9, when you as the avatar woke up in the bed at the beginning of the game, you could turn on the clock radio, and there was like a pop rock arrangement of the that Ultima song Stones, and I played acoustic guitar on that.
Nice.
Um, and I did music on a bunch of the games that we launched inside of MetaPlace as well.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I've done it here and there.
Very cool.
But it's, it hasn't been like the main thing.
Sure, sure. So, speaking of the main thing, I have a thing that I want to really talk to you about a lot, which
Okay.
I sent you some PMs about. I sent you that article that I wrote about, like simulationist RPGs. So, I really want to talk to you about that at some point. But first, we have to talk about Playable Worlds, which is your big project that you're working on now. And I'd like you to just introduce people to what that is and how it's going.
Sure. So, Playable Worlds. Um, wow, you even I see the Twitch stream here.
Yeah.
You've even got
Well, actually, it's funny.
the
Frank Lantz
press release up there.
spontaneously came on the stream just before. He just had to go. He was just here, and
Oh,
he happened to send this to me. He didn't even know you were coming on. I was like, "Raph is coming on the stream like in like 10 minutes," and he's like, "Oh man, weird." But he just sent me this. Yeah.
oh wow. Well, um, yeah. So we are actually still staying pretty quiet, but there's some hints up on playableworlds.com if you wanted to go there. And basically, we have publicly said that we are in fact working on making kind of the next generation of online worlds, right? The future of MMOs, really. um and you can see what, yeah, there you go. um and this website is more aimed at like possible funders and that kind of
Hmm.
thing than it is at players. We haven't talked about the game yet, but for those of you who are people who ever played my other MMOs like Ultima Online or Star Wars Galaxies, I guess the way I'd put it is we are out to make you happy. Um, and also to just kind of try to bring MMOs into a more modern place, right? Um, I've been pretty vocal about the fact that it's been disappointing to see MMOs kind of confine themselves by and large to a World of Warcraft style template, when there's so much more potential for them. And you've even got the UO map hanging right next to your head back there.
Oh
Perfect.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah,
at some point, maybe if we have time, I can actually climb up on that bookshelf behind me.
yeah.
I drew the original paper version of that map that
Wow,
then was Dennis Loubet then took and turned into the version you have there.
amazing.
Um, and I have it sitting up there. But yeah, basically, when you look at the capabilities that we have today, right? The fact that MMOs are still basically about running through quests, killing 10 rats of various sizes, um, running through pretty static and worlds and environments. When we look back to how they were born, there was so much more variety and richness, right? And I like to point out that Ultima Online ran on computers less powerful than this Apple Watch.
Hmm. Way less powerful.
So right. So there's so much more headroom now that we have cloud computing to do really interesting things, right? And by and large, we're just not doing it. And
Hmm.
so a big part of what we're trying to do is shift the emphasis and say we have all of this capability. Let's use it for somewhat different purposes, right?
Hmm.
Um, one of the other examples I often use is Ultima Online allowed you to customize houses down to the individual tile, build multiple stories, all that kind of thing. Any given player house in Ultima Online probably has more interactive objects than an entire Battlefield or Fortnite match.
Hmm.
And it came out in 1997,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
So I think this is where it ties back to the stuff you were just saying about the potential for simulation and whatnot, right? it feels to me like there's a lot of headroom for us to do uh, really living worlds, right? Worlds that feel like alternate realities to a much deeper level than what we've seen right now. Um, at the same time, I think MMOs have also been stuck a little bit in a rut of being, um, World of Warcraft opened them up a lot to a broader audience. They were a niche before WoW,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
A big niche that made lots of money, but still a niche. These days, kids have grown up with RuneScape. Kids have grown up with Minecraft. I think way more people understand MMOs, but there's also people now know that even core games do not need to be as grindy, as time consuming, right? As they used to be, right? And so
Hmm.
I think there's a real opportunity to modernize the MMO and kind of bring it into today's modern world for the modern gamer.
Yeah, so that there is a not a rub there exactly, but there's a relationship, sort of a relationship there between the, so like I get into arguments a lot of times with people who are skeptical of like simulationism, I guess, as a way of designing MMOs or RPGs. Um, and because they're skeptical of them, because I mean, frankly, a lot of them are just old at this point. A lot of them are just older games. Like a lot of the examples that you could point to are 10 years older or more. And so there is a lot of like kind of usability issues sometimes, and like sort of awkwardness, and balance issues, and I think there's something to be said for the idea of like, whatever we're making, we do want to make it a designed experience, even if it feels simulate, if it is also a simulationist experience, we also want it to be really considerate of players. So that's sort of what you're talking about there, I think, with like time and being considerate of players' time. Something I've been saying for a long time is that like, Ultima Online, by the way, I just have to say, is one of the most important games of my life, easily, and most formative games. I don't make games like that, but there's like such a huge part of my emotional game core that is just so wishing that I could have that experience again. But at the same time, like if somebody made, I've been saying for a long time, if somebody made like my perfect MMO at this point, like would I play it? Because there's this feeling that like they have to take a lot of time. They have to take, and I wonder if there's something fundamental about that, that they, because they are a virtual world, and if it's a world, you have to kind of live in it a little bit, right? Um, and but anyway, I'm kind of scattering here about a couple different topics, but there is sort
No,
of
no,
just
it's it. I mean, I think that point right there is really good, right? Like I think in today's world, when we look around at the ways in which people touch other kinds of alternate worlds, okay, which could be whatever TV show fandom, cinematic universe, manga, D&D podcast, whatever it is, okay,
sure, sure,
and there's lots of examples of it, right?
yeah,
Um, that what we see is that players don't necessarily need to sit there for 4 hours every night in order to have a relationship with that fantasy and a relationship with that world, right?
hmm,
In today's world, you can connect with these things in a whole bunch of ways, right? And if the heart of this alternate world really is, oh, it is an alternate world that is running there all the time, why does that mean that you have to be online 4 hours at a stretch, 7 days a week in order to stay in contact with it? Like,
hmm,
that doesn't make sense if you think about it. That's
hmm,
an odd requirement. If I kind of analogize it, um, a lot of the early MMOs, especially as you got into guilds, they're almost like bowling leagues that play every night.
hmm,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's
sure,
like, no, you've got a guild, you've got a team, you've got a party, you've got to practice, you got to be together. That means you got to schedule time. Scheduling time's a pain in the ass. You've got to do it for a certain amount of time. If you're going to go on a raid, well, that's going to take this long. Oh, all of those kinds of things, right? Um, and it's I don't know, this is a very crunchy game design sidetrack, but it ties into that trust spectrum article
Mhm.
I did with Aaron Camerata a while back, which I
Mhm.
don't know if you read, but that article was all about how players build trust relationships with one another.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things about it is that things like that require people to really kind of come together on it's like 7,000 words, man. Your readers are not going to be able your
No,
viewers
no,
will not
I
be able to
I
read
just
it in
I'm
parallel, but
just showing I'm
um
just showing them your
yeah,
website as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
it's actually a super crunchy article, right? Talking about, look, some games require that kind of time investment. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of things that people could do in a UO or a Galaxies and can still do in something like a WoW that are not raiding, that don't involve that kind of bowling league, keep up with the Joneses, check in all the time kind of
Right.
thing.
Sure.
Um, and in particular, I think that it's one of the things that the theme park style of MMO design, right? Because it's fundamentally about party based, team based combat, it demands that kind of investment. You can't build a good team
Mhm.
without putting in the hours, right?
Right.
But when you look back at UO or at Galaxies, which were sandboxes, it's like um, combat and parties were in there, of course, but so was crafting, a player economy, dancing in the cantina, having a theater troupe, building an economic empire, and today what we see is that some of the things that UO pioneered, right? I'll just mention a few. House decorating, okay? UO came out in 1997, right? Can go out and check when The Sims came out
Mhm.
as a cross comparison,
Mhm.
right? UO had tile based house decorating back then. Today, that is the foundation of Animal Crossing and piles of other very casually accessible, like things that don't demand tons of time. Still deep. I don't mean casual in that sense of it's a fluff
No.
lightweight,
Yeah.
but something that's easily accessible. Um, there's things like character customization. UO was one of the first 2D games to have in-game avatar character customization, like
Hmm.
ever. Okay,
Wow.
even in online, yeah, but even in 2D in single player 2D games, it
Right.
just wasn't really much of a thing. In
Hmm.
Diablo, all your avatars looked the same,
Yeah, it
right?
didn't matter what you were
Um,
wearing. Yeah.
yeah. Today, of course, we take for granted that like there's entire mobile game genres that are just about fashion and dressing up your
Sure.
character,
Yeah.
right? And obviously that means that it's not that we're trying to make that mobile game, but that means that it's obviously something that fits into a mobile kind of play style, which means obviously it supports short sessions, less time, checking in periodically.
Right.
UO had farming,
Yeah.
like that became
Fishing.
Farmville and that whole branch. So a
Yeah.
whole bunch of things that were in sandbox MMOs actually became the foundation of whole mobile genres
Right.
and were in hindsight much more accessible. We got made fun of a lot though,
Hmm.
right? We got made fun of for putting dancing in. Today, of course, dancing and Fortnite, it seems silly to think that dancing and video games don't go together.
Mhm.
But back then, like when we made Galaxies, people like
It was like
savaged us for
memes.
having
Yeah.
dancing.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in hindsight, I think a lot of the things that we were doing were actually more broadly appealing than party based combat. Um, but at the time, the audience was still just kind of core RPGers who wanted to play 4 hours a night, and
Right.
so the EverQuest World of Warcraft style was a good match. Um, but
So
when I look around today, I go, wow, a lot of those players don't have as much time anymore. A lot of those players, I know people who 3 generations of family playing Ultima Online,
hmm.
right? And they don't all have the same amount of time.
Right.
But if they can all contribute to their guild in different ways because they have different play styles and different time availability, right? That's why they have stuck with UO.
Mm,
whereas they wouldn't be able to do that with something like WoW.
sure.
Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of room to modernize the MMO in that way and really offer ways to play for different people.
I had not, so I have thought a lot about Ultima Online and its sort of trajectory and like what I feel like sort of happened to it over time and how it compared in its early days, in particularly in the beta and in the first year or so after their launch, and then how it progressed over time. And it's interesting to me to think like that actually maybe in a way now is more of a good time that to make a simulationist MMO than it was back then. Because back then, yeah, it was like the only people who knew about UO, like in my high school, I not one other I knew about UO because I was like, like this hardcore PC gamer type. But no one else I knew what it was really. It was not a super popular thing in the common. And so now what we have is we have those hardcore gamer types who just want to do the quests and get the sort of want to use it as like a strategy game almost. They can be sort of like they can play something else, like there's lots of options for them. And or they can play this too, but I'm just saying like yeah, the it might, I guess what you're saying is now might be a better time for this kind of thing than back in 97, or I guess 2003 was Galaxies or somewhere around there.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
three. Yeah. I think there's a couple of things there, right? Like it's easy for us to get how much the world has changed too. So as a great example, the you mentioned, oh, who else in my school maybe knew about UO or whatever.
Yeah.
Ultima Online was the fastest selling boxed game in EA history.
Wow.
Okay.
Huh.
But the scale of the world has changed so much, right? That
True.
fastest selling moved, it sold a couple 100,000 boxes
Hmm.
in the space of a couple of months. That was crazy fast back then.
I see. I see.
Today, a hit game might do that in the first like day or few hours even.
Hmm.
So the scale of the world is just different. We had to design that for UO was designed it we had to run on a 14.4 modem. We preferred a 28.8 modem.
Hmm.
Let's say that you were a supremely well-connected gamer and had a 28.8 modem. So that means that your typical internet connection, let's say you just have like a cable internet connection at home,
I
like with
actually had a
Cox or Spectrum.
33.6. Just gonna
You
throw that out
yeah,
there.
but let's say that today you're a gamer who uses cable, cable internet or whatever.
Hmm.
That means that you only have 17,000 times more bandwidth.
Right.
Okay. Think about that. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, it's just a really, really different world today.
Hmm.
So I think there are lots of points of evidence that the time is ripe. If you go looking around, for example, first of all, like we can even look at proof points because even though WoW came into PC gaming, mainstream PC gaming kind of just sucked the oxygen out of the MMO space and
Yeah.
everything became WoW like. If you actually look outside of mainstream PC gaming, okay, um, RuneScape was originally born as a UO clone.
Hmm.
Like you can go ask the Jagex guys, they will tell you.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes,
I
we
didn't know
wanted
that.
to clone UO, but do it in Shockwave and put it on the web.
Right.
And RuneScape is a monster. Like RuneScape is hugely popular for, decades now.
Yeah.
It's not a small game and
Right.
reached many, many millions of users. Um, Another game that people don't think of as um, sort of a child of UO, but which absolutely is Minecraft.
Hmm.
Okay. So there's even a direct line of descent there because, the UO worked with an abstract property system for that simulation layer,
Uh huh.
right? And all crafting was based on combining properties that were attached to the objects,
Okay.
right? So you could use anything that represented wood in order and attach it to ingots of metal in order to make an axe or
Uh
whatever,
huh.
right? Um, that abstract property stuff was core to how UO worked. Well, there was an MMO that people, a bunch of ex RuneScape people started making. It was super hardcore called Worm Online. It's still around.
Huh.
And um, it was sort of, oh, how do we continue that kind of design thread?
Mm-hmm.
And that same, of course, one of the people working on that was Notch. And if
Huh.
you look at Minecraft's like crafting system, it's basically just like UO's.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so there's a line of descent there that kind of validates the idea that wait a minute, actually, these other ways to play are hugely popular.
Hmm.
A lot of people like them.
Yeah, I find I mean, I think that there's something that's happened in games generally where um, that you're talking about it as like WoW having sucked up all the space, but I think but there's actually a like a higher level, I would say, a problem. But it's not necessarily entirely a problem. But the idea of games being more and more sort of like content delivery mechanisms, very much on these
Mm.
like uh, you know metrics based design and retention based design, and a lot of these things that are just like, this is what happens when you have like just it's like a market, and certain things are going to just uh kind of like pierce that more strongly and sort of dominate and become these, and then everyone copies that, and so you get this like effect of everybody kind of making these. In this case it would be like the WoW likes, but then in the mobile space you have like these kind of gotcha things, which I think as also similar. And I see that like kind of that like gotchaism is how I would describe what has happened with many genres, not just MMOs. I'm personally more interested, for some reason that I can't quite place, in single player simulationist RPGs. And so I've like my some of my favorite things have been like the older Fallout games, and the older Elder Scroll games, and I find that those also have been more like Diablo-fied or WoWified, and um, so I guess my question, and the thing that I'm concerned about, I guess, is if Playable Worlds isn't like sufficiently gotchafied, how does it survive? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
is there a space
yeah,
for
wow,
that?
that's a pointed question, man. Are you going to ruin the game? No. So let me break. I think there's two separate things there to pull apart, and maybe I can talk about them in order. The first is what I would almost call the that what you call I often call it stagecraft, okay? But it's sort of I think of it as from a design point of view. This is supposed to be a game design podcast, right? So
Sure.
if we think about this from a design point of view, I often oppose simulation and stagecraft. And by stagecraft, what I'm trying to conjure up is the stuff that magicians do where they make you think something's going on where it isn't.
Hmm.
It's things like the props in theater that look like that's a real tree, but if you're standing next to it, you go, "Oh, wait a minute, that's a 2D piece of cardboard." But if you're far enough away, it sells you,
Right.
right? And especially single player narrative games are about the art of stagecraft. Okay. And I think it's important, right? Like as designers and as professionals, we can have preferences towards one end or the other of this, right? But I think it's important we acknowledge both are goddamn hard.
Sure.
And there's an art to it and all the rest of it, right? So this is not in any way a knock against one approach or another. And for different kind of artistic visions in your game, you should use the tool that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Um, and in the case of something like WoW, one of its huge triumphs was the way in which it applied stagecraft to what had been a really open-ended, uh, a really
Yeah.
open-ended kind of thing. Herbivore, I'll get to part two. Just give me a minute. So uh, that's for the chat there. Um, so I think the biggest innovation that WoW had was actually that they handheld you through every single level of the game with handcrafted quests.
Right.
Nobody before WoW could afford to do that. WoW outspent every other MMO on the market by a factor of 4 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
no joke. Like, they
Jeez.
literally outspent everybody by 400%,
Yeah.
500%. Massive, massive amount of money relative to the competition. Nobody else could have made that many quests. They didn't have the budget to do it.
Sure.
Um, the fact that Blizzard thought that way is because Blizzard had come from a very narrative tradition, a very um, not necessarily just single player, but limited multiplayer narrative campaigns kind of tradition, right? So it's a natural evolution. If that's the line you come from, that's what you do.
Right.
I believe you can stack stagecraft on top of simulation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is next to impossible to stack simulation on top of a stagecraft world.
Mm.
Okay. And I think it because you can have simulation going, which is fundamentally about emergence, and drop quest lines on top of it. But if you build a game out of quests and then let players do freeform player housing or something like that, they're going to break your carefully crafted experience, right?
Right.
So yeah, so that's it feels to me like a huge amount actually of the current of what we're seeing today in games with all the shifts from games as a service and content driven games and all of that kind of thing is partly a culture shift where studios that are fundamentally they've come up doing stagecraft work. It's
Mm.
what they know, it's the tools they apply, and when they're suddenly in a game as a service environment where um, which doesn't imply a business model, right? It just implies kind of ongoing delivery, entertaining on a regular basis, all of those sorts of things. Doing ongoing content delivery is freaking expensive. It's freaking slow. It's challenging,
Yeah.
right? Which is why online games have historically leaned towards other tools on the bench, including simulation, including PvP, including um, other forms of storytelling like episodic storytelling or etc. Right. So that's part one, right? Like I don't think that basically that's why I see so many studios having trouble turning a corner.
Okay.
Okay. Second, to get back to your pointed monetization question, right? Um, and we'll answer this just for herbivore. Am I dodging the question of how I protect the game from capitalism? Um, I mean, we live and breathe capitalism. I can't make the game without capitalism, unfortunately. It's too big a game to make without money coming in. That's
Mm-hmm.
just how it is. In
Sure.
fact, running live games in general, the costs of running big games can't be underestimated. It costs a
Mm-hmm.
lot. That's why MMOs, originally online games charged by the minute, right? It used to be that if you were an online game aficionado, you had a bill in the thousands of dollars a month.
Jeez.
And the cost of that has come down and down and down.
Yeah.
UO was one of the pioneers of the flat rate subscription fee for an online
Mm-hmm.
game. MMOs are also to blame for free to play. Okay. That business model was born out of MMOs.
Hmm.
Some of the pioneers were actually text muds were doing it first.
Mm-hmm.
And also, of course, MMO spin offs in South Korea in particular.
Okay.
And it was partly inspired by the fact that players were spending thousands of dollars on eBay markets, buying and
Right.
selling UO houses. That was actually part of the inspiration originally
I see.
for free to play. Developers started going, wait a minute. if aftermarkets can do this, we should cut out the middleman and just sell stuff directly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's where some of that came from. I think it's important to sever just the metrics piece from the business model, from the service piece, right? Because first of all, metrics, it is easy to be a slave to metrics,
Hmm.
but every game designer I know thinks playtesting is a good thing. Metrics is just another way to gather playtest data,
Right. Sure.
right? And in fact, MMOs were one of the pioneers of game metrics precisely because they were one of the first connected game genres. So it
Yeah.
was possible for the first time.
Right.
Like I could pull up graphs from Legend Mud in 1993 where I could show you how many monsters of each level were being killed by what level player, right?
Heat maps, basically.
Yeah, yeah, basically, right? So that we could go, oh, look at this, level sevens are underpowered or
Right.
whatever. Um, so the problem with metrics is when you don't know how to ask the right questions. You become what you measure. And
Mm.
so if you measure bad things, your game will go in a bad
Or you
direction.
design in such a way that around being measurable. Do you know what I mean? Like you design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like not everything's quantifiable and not everything's necessarily quantifiable in the most obvious way. A
Right.
great example of this, it took a really long time to persuade big corporations that community management was net profitable rather than being a cost sink.
Mm.
Okay,
Interesting.
for a really long time companies thought, well, I'm paying for forum bandwidth and I'm paying for moderators, and the forums look like a cesspit, and that's negative marketing dollars as far as I'm concerned, right?
Yeah.
And it took a lot of digging to eventually establish a way of measuring it that made people realize, oh, wait, the number one predictor of retention is actually community participation.
Mm.
And the number one predictor of revenue is retention. And today we know that, and everybody runs communities,
Right.
right? But back then there was a time period where people didn't know that. So not being able to ask the right questions can just really mess you up and
Mm.
and lead you in poor directions with metrics. Um, Another way to put it is, this is the design geeky way to put it rather than the business hat way, is metrics are great for finding local maxima.
Hmm.
They're terrible at finding new space,
Sure.
right? So good for optimizing something, but they're lousy at telling you I'm climbing the wrong hill in the first place. That actually takes intuition,
Creativity.
designer knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about our business model yet. Are we going to have one? Yeah, we are. Do we want as many people as possible to play the game? Absolutely. Am I a fan of exploitative, money grubbing, unethical business practices? Hell no, I am
Sure. Sure.
not.
Yeah.
And I am a believer that if you build a great relationship with the player, one built on honesty, they will know and understand the value of what they're getting for their dollar. And they
Hmm.
will know and understand maybe even why something costs this much to add and
Hmm.
why the costs are what they are. And if you build that kind of a relationship and can make a game or an entertainment experience into somebody's real hobby, then I mean you're an idiot if you can't make money off of it,
Hmm.
right? Like you should be able to make money off of that,
Hmm.
and the player should feel like it's a fair trade, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Or
you're
even a
providing a
bargain.
service. You know,
Yeah,
you are literally doing labor to create this thing, and
yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah, no, I'm
yeah.
not. I'm
And
also not against making money off games. Obviously, I'm in the
yeah,
same business.
well, but yeah, but what I mean is, I think that holds true for any business model.
Hmm.
There are people out there who do free to play ethically, and there are people who do it badly. There are
Yeah,
people out there who do subscriptions ethically, and people who do it badly. There
sure.
are people out there who do one time box purchases ethically, and people who do it badly,
Yeah,
right? A good example, like, think about something like a box game, right?
yeah,
A box game, we try to get you to fork over a stack of dollars in advance without knowing whether you're going to like it.
right. Sure, sure.
And so and this is where terms like bullshot from fake marketing screenshots came from, right?
Mm.
Like we all know there's a really long tradition of making the outside of that box look as awesome as possible. And then when you actually get into the game, it doesn't quite actually deliver that.
Yeah.
But then, oh no, too late. We got your $60, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the video game business for decades,
Sure.
man,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's a case to be made that no, 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 try it for free and only pay me if you like it is more ethical
Oh
if
no,
done right.
I I I
So
I've never been really against free to play specifically or any particular model. I don't really know anything about business, to be honest with you. And
I'll
so
stop talking business.
no. It's very interesting because I am technically doing business. I just don't know anything about it. So I'm always interested to hear and learn more about that. But my question is more about um, like things like leveling up and random rewards and getting players like hooked in terms of like sort of Skinner box style mechanisms. That's been, to me, that is also a thing distinct from the old simulationist idea of the RPG. Of course, RPGs have always had like leveling up and loot and things like that, right? But
Yep.
but I also feel like that has been just amped up so much, particularly in mobile games, but also in like I feel like Diablo actually was a big spike because of it. It created that like go into the dungeon, click on a bunch of stuff, get a bunch of random things, and bring it back, that loop that's just so addictive. And I wonder if you think about that sort of addiction versus engagement, or like engaging in a fantasy of some sort, or
Yeah.
whatever's not addiction. uh
Yeah.
and yeah.
So this is something I've actually written and talked about a lot, right? For those viewers who don't know, I wrote a book called A Theory of Fun, which was all about what is it that drives fun in human psychology, and why is it that we find things to be fun.
There it is.
And yeah, that's first edition now. There's a full color second edition out now. Um, there's also a Theory of Fun 10 years later talk and video, which people could go find. And it actually specifically talks about that. Um, I'll skip to the punchline at the end, kind of the conclusion of what fun is. It's fundamentally games are hijacking a reward loop in the human brain, which is designed to reward us for curiosity, because being curious about stuff and wanting to learn new things is frankly a lot of work, and it's hard. And so if we didn't have sort of an intrinsic reward loop for it, we probably wouldn't do it. And in fact, even with the loop, we tend not to do it, right? um, and a lot of things in the world hijack that reward loop, right? And there's all kinds of niceties around what things press the button right and why, and da 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 da, all of that kind of thing. But a great example of things that hijack the reward loop without actually having you learn anything, a slot machine is probably the ultimate example of it, right? The
Yeah.
correct lesson to learn from a slot machine is walk away, right? And I
Sure.
always use this example, sort of a simple human computer interaction loop kind of thing that specifically tailored towards games, that I call game grammar, which is sort of a way of decomposing games and game systems. If you think of it as we have an input, this will be my icon for input.
Sure.
Okay.
That's good.
And you have an input, you identify like I will have a goal, I formed a goal, I've got an intent. Let me check for an affordance. Is there something I can push or press or do something to? Okay, I found something. I'm going to use my input and click. Now it goes into my next handy aid here. It goes into the black box.
Uh-huh.
And the whole point is you don't know what is in the black box.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of algorithm in here, but the player doesn't know what it is, right? But they do something and they get a piece of feedback out of it. right?
Mm-hmm.
So they press the button, it machinery works, and boing! Here's the sparkly bit of feedback. Yay! It's all
Right.
colorful.
Sure.
Hurrah! I feel good because I got a pat on the back with a cool ching sound effect and
Uh-huh.
whatever.
Look at
You know,
that.
my little cloudburst went
Those
off.
colors. Yeah, sure.
Okay, what does a slot machine do? A slot machine goes click, boing! Like there's no black box there to speak of, right?
Well, sort of.
Right?
The little spinny things, I suppose you could say is the black box, but maybe
Well,
not.
it's
Yeah.
it's actually a black box designed not to teach you anything. It's a black box that relies on a psychological trick called apophenia, where this is a human brain bug that leads us to believe that there are patterns when there aren't any.
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
and all forms of gambling are based in part on seeing patterns where there aren't any. But
Yep.
here's the thing, real gameplay is based on seeing patterns where there are patterns and
That's so well
slowly
put.
figuring out the black box and
Right.
kind of removing the cover from it until at the
Yeah.
end you see the gears moving and you go,
Sure.
oh, right. And so that to me is at the heart of what games are. It's why shallow gamification is a lie. Just throwing points at you, throwing badges at you without learning anything doesn't, that's not games, right? It's a hijacking. Um, so the problem is, right? Like, how you can't say take away this tool because without this tool, the player can't learn.
Right.
They need this.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's like I think this example is in the book. If you pressed a button while playing Tetris and the piece rotated to a random position, you can't get better at Tetris,
Right.
right? Like there needs to be a certain amount of predictability for you to learn, right? And at the same time, you can't get rid of randomness because I think of the black box as a machine.
Uh-huh.
But another way to think of it, and this is super mathy, but you can think of it as a math function, right? F of X.
Okay.
And game content is different X's to put through the math.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that is why we can make Tetris variations with more pieces, less pieces, different speeds, different size boards, right? All of those kinds of variants.
Mm-hmm.
A different level in Mario is content that is just different numbers to push through the same system,
Yeah.
right? The more numbers you push through a system, the easier it is to figure out what the system does.
Uh-huh.
And that is a huge reason why a game like Diablo uses randomness, why we use random rolls in RPGs, right? Because they increase the landscape without needing to actually make a bigger machine, right? Um, so it's hard for us to draw a line and say, this is now too random, or draw a line and say, this is now too trivial a black
Mm-hmm.
box. Um, and that's why it's actually really worrisome that lawyers and legislators and whatnot are saying, oh, we're going to ban loot boxes or something, because I'm worried that they will not know where to draw that line.
Mm.
And in the process of killing loot boxes, they'll kill the wandering monster spawn or something that is
Right.
also a random roll
That's
out of a
true.
possible set,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a game design subtlety at that point. It's not an easy cut to make. So it is. These are tools, and I strongly believe this. These are crazy powerful tools that rewire human brains, and therefore must be used ethically. Right? Strongly believe that. Um, but and that means, if you're using brain hacks to extract dollars, then screw you. Like that's not good.
Yeah.
It's a dark pattern. It's
Sure.
exploitative. A key part of my philosophy of games is that you are building your artistic constructs in order to provide a learning to players. Even if that learning is just how to dodge 2D bullets in a shmup, right?
Mhm.
You are providing learning. They are playing with your toy in order to master a system.
Yeah.
And if to me the betrayal is when there's no system to master, then you're just screwing with the player, and that to me is the bridge too far.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I also wonder. I guess I wonder. What we were talking earlier about, like the aestheticizations of certain kinds of fun. So, for example, like if you have a fighting game, or if you have a tactics game, or if you have an MMO, these things have all been aestheticized. Like when people consider them fun or not, that is based on like what they've played in the past largely. And so my concern, and this is a concern that I have for all kinds of games actually. I'm making a tactics game right now, and I am concerned that it won't hook people, partially because they are very aestheticized with something like the mobile Fire Emblem game, which is like largely a gacha game with a very small little tactics kind of veneer, a little bit. You know what I mean? And so I guess my concern, and my or the thing that I was trying to get at more specifically is just like, how does a modern MMO how does a modern MMO, I mean, I guess maybe we have examples. I'd like to actually hear you talk a little bit about, do you have any thoughts on EVE Online, and how that fits into this sort of this rubric? Because that's definitely like not a WoW like, right? Like,
No, it's not. And
yeah.
actually, it's a it's another one that if you talk to the original Eve folks, they will tell you that they set out to make UO in space.
Mm,
That was
I,
their original like
yeah,
vision statement.
it seems like it.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think Eve Online's a great example of very much building something systemic, right? Um, it still has a pile of random elements in it, right? Like those are still all over the place.
Sure.
I think that definitely not all games came from UO. No more birds. I'm positive about that. Um, I think that I think the question of whether or not a given developer or um, publisher or whatever is building their business model in a particular way, right? First, other people out there in the genre can definitely kind of like ruin the swimming pool for everybody, right? Like that
Mm,
is absolutely a thing that can happen.
interesting.
And I think we have seen that happen in several times. I think a second thing though is of course the pushback from the player base can result in correcting, even overcorrecting. And I do have faith that eventually, that basically it's a slow motion negotiation between players and businesses can land someplace, right?
Hmm.
Someplace good. I do believe that. Um, every time somebody gets over exploitative, you get somebody saying, I'm going to make a pile of money by offering a flat fee game. And right. And then people flock to it. And then they start getting tired of paying a flat fee. And somebody comes, you can play for free. I just won't be as aggressive about the upsells as those
Hmm.
guys were. And, the market kind of corrects.
I see.
But I think the other thing that is just best practice is being more transparent with your user base and being upfront about what people get and why they get it. And that it feels to me like that's kind of independent of genre, right?
Hmm.
um the question of how polluted the pool is sort of a business decision that you have to make up front and say, wow, is this like, how sensitive is the audience to this at this point? What kinds of promises do I need to make? But fundamentally, and I think we see this with, gosh, there's so many examples, especially among smaller indies, of game companies that run ongoing services. Like I think of Clay Games and the Don't Starve games. I think of
Hmm.
Spry Fox. I think of so many others that have done free to play stuff, and nonetheless, gamers love them. And right, like
Sure.
there's models out there of you can do this right,
Yeah.
right.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I think so much of it is about building a trust relationship. Again, I always come back to that.
Right. Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, I don't know why I guess, I guess because you worked on now, which Ultima games you worked on? You said you worked on Ultima 9 and UO, but you
Not
didn't.
really. I
Oh, okay.
I Ultima 9 development was happening at the same time that Ultima Online development was.
I see.
And there was a recording studio on the first floor of the building, and they were often idle. And so they actually had this program whereby anybody at Origin could sign up and get 24 hours of free studio time. So I actually went
Ah.
down there and recorded an album, um, which your viewers can find, by the way, on Spotify or Amazon
Oh,
or wherever.
nice.
Yeah, it's out there. It's from '99.
Cool.
It's called After the Flood. I'm much better now, by the way, I'll say. Anyway, and that meant that the guys in the studio, who was our audio designers and composers and whatnot there, knew that I played, and that's why they said, "Oh, hey, those acoustic guitar arrangements, could you do one of Stone's?" And so
Ah.
that's actually my only contribution to any other Ultima game, is
Oh,
that.
okay.
So I worked on Ultima Online, and I was the creative lead for Ultima Online at my wife and I, actually, a huge amount of Ultima Online is based on our job application design sample that we sent in when we applied for the job.
Huh.
Um, and we showed up on the first day, and they told us.
Wait, you both applied for the job together or something,
Actually,
or?
we were. The story is, um, when Richard Garriott and Star Long managed to get funding out of EA,
Uh huh.
they went out there to go find first a programmer who could help them build a prototype, and they found a guy named Rick Delischman, who's one of the truly, truly important MMO developers of all time, unsung hero because he doesn't do press or anything. Um, and he was a guy. Who played and made muds. Specifically, he made them with myself and my wife and his girlfriend at the time, who was a classmate of ours from college.
I
So the
see.
four of us were friends,
Okay.
and we all worked on a mud called Legend Mud. First, we played a mud called Worlds of Carnage. Then we worked on a mud called Legend Mud, and he got this gig through this. My He ended up working for a shareware company, and his application to the shareware company was an adaptation of a board game design I had done, and that ended up being my first game credit. Actually, was the shareware board game for Morathware, if you have any really old school PC shareware folks around. And
Mm-hmm.
then Morathware got approached by Origin to do contract work on a different game, Bioforge,
Oh, I
and
know
Rick was.
Bioforge. I
Yeah,
played
and
that.
so Rick was talking about Bioforge with Star, who was the AP on Bioforge, and they got to talking. What would you really like to make? And Rick said, "Well, I make muds. I want to make online worlds." And Star said, "Funny that." And so Rick ended up making the first prototype of what was then called Multima for Star. That was he actually put a server backend on Ultima 6 and made like this orcs versus humans hot potato game, basically.
Huh.
And then that turned into the actual Ultima Online project. And there were a bunch of other folks there in the mix early on, that including Jim Greer, who went on to found Congregate, lots of other folks. But the bottom line is, they then said to Rick, "We need designers. Do you have any to recommend?" And of course, he recommended the two who'd been working with him on Legend Mud, my wife and I.
I see.
So Kristen and I ended up sending in our applications for that. Um, and we included in that, they sent a bunch of like, they sent us code sample tests and stuff, and we're like, yes, they sent us code samples and said, find the bug, and we wrote back, "We're pretty sure the bug you mean is this missing parentheses here. That said, this is a terrible architecture for an online game. This should be an event-driven system with messages, with trigger events that fire, because otherwise this won't be scalable. This whole thing needs re-architected this way," right? They were all single-player game architects, right? So
Hmm.
the code example was actually, like, one of the examples was a light and a switch, and the way it worked was that every loop of the game, the light checked the state of the switch to see if it was
I
off or
see.
on,
Right.
which is a very old school main loop, single loop kind of way of doing
That's
things.
how I would
And we're
probably
like,
do it.
no, 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 no. This needs to be and a use event fires on the light switch, and when you use it, it fires an event on the light, and the light receives a message and changes state, and then this takes like 2 microseconds, right? Like,
Right.
and anyway. So the other thing we sent in was they asked us for quest samples. We sent them huge quests because the quests we'd written on Legend Mud were like the size of entire text adventures. Um, but at the end of it, we said, but that's not how we would do this anymore. We would do something much more simulationist.
Mm,
Imagine if every object had abstract properties behind it. Imagine if, and we laid out a whole design for it, and we both got hired.
mm.
And we show up on the first day and we ask, so what's the game? And they said, oh, it's going to be great. Imagine if every object had abstract properties. And we went, oh, shit, because it was then we kind of realized that the game was going to be built around our ideas.
Mhm.
And you got to understand that we were like 23,
Wow.
20. Okay, we were just about that whole team was kids. We were
Wow.
all like the median age was early 20s. The
So
oldest people on the team, right? Like
what role did Richard Garriott play on that project?
he
Cuz
was the
like
executive producer and headed the studio.
okay. So did he but he wasn't like in there, like in the nitty-gritty making design decisions really or
Very rarely.
I see. I see.
He laid out, obviously a bunch of big vision things, but he was the executive producer.
Gotcha,
Star
gotcha.
was actually the game director,
Uh-huh.
and Star didn't tend to be down deep in the game design.
I see.
um, we had several folks who were Ultima designers from a single player background, and it was a real challenge, honestly. Working together, it got pretty contentious at times. And you can actually find, if people are willing to go on Quora.com, there's actually what was Origin culture like during the development of Ultima Online that has
Mm.
a whole bunch of answers from myself and other programmers who were there at the time, right? Um, but the core of the team was mostly mud developers who
Okay.
were
That makes
all
sense.
some fresh out of high school.
Huh.
Like the youngest person on the team was 17.
Wow.
Um, and most of us, I think there was like a 27-year-old, but most of us were in early 20s at most. So yeah, it was a naive team, and we didn't know that we were proposing a whole bunch of impossible stuff.
Mhm.
And in the end, we managed to pull off actually building a bunch of impossible stuff because we
Mhm.
didn't know it was impossible.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it was kind of a crazy thing, but that's kind of the story there, how that got started.
Well, that's that. Like I said, it was such a huge part of my gaming formational foundation as a player of games, and so I'm really excited about Playable Worlds. I'm really
Me
excited
too.
to hear more about it. When do you think we'll hear more and see more about it?
We should be going public with more information next year.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I'm super pumped. What can people look at or go to plug some stuff if other than
So
Playable Worlds?
aside from going to look at, if you're on the Playable Worlds website, we have actually given multiple cryptic hint dropping interviews that you can find under the news block. So if you're curious on that kind of side, there is a fairly inactive, barely born Reddit that you can find. It's our Playable Worlds. So people can go hang out there. And there is a link there to a Discord. So there is a Playable Worlds MMO unofficial Discord, and I hang out there. So if you really want to get the absolute, freshest news, I hang out there and chat with folks. It's not real big yet because we haven't talked about game stuff yet, but if people are curious, that's probably the place to go. And we have a lot of high level design discussions there right now. But I will say that once we open up, we do intend to do open community development. It's something that I've always done. On UO, we were out there on IRC with players every week. We called it the House of Commons, right? We'd gather together and do open IRC chats. I used to blog like on a regular basis for the user base, hang out on the forums. In Star Wars Galaxies, we pioneered the whole patch notes process with here's the features that we're thinking about doing, and here's the design doc. Rip it to pieces for us, please.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've always been a believer in that, and intend to carry that forward with the community as we proceed to building it.
That sounds super awesome. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Raph. I got to go on to my
Sure, it's
next
always a
guest.
pleasure to chat.
Of course,
And
of course.
I don't know if you heard, but one of those board games you played,
Oh,
it's one of those board games that you
yeah.
played with me at GDC is coming out from WizKids in February.
Oh, awesome. Well,
So
definitely keep me
yeah,
posted about that. I'll check it out.
yeah, it's
Yay.
called Waddle. It's penguins, so they waddle.
Okay.
So yeah,
Cute. Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much,
cool.
Raph. And I
Sure
will.
thing. Always a pleasure.
All right. I'll see you next time.
Alrighty.
Peace. All right. So now on to our next guest. No stopping. Actually, this is our last guest, and this is going to be Mr. Richard Terrell. So let's see what we got here. Hi, 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 hi. So yeah, that was awesome. Really cool to have Raph Koster. Definitely a game design hero of mine. A lot of my game design heroes today. Pretty great stuff. So yeah, let's start this video call now. Let's just get it going with Kirby Kid. Hello.
Oop.
Can you hear me?
I cannot. I think I can hear you. I just muted the stream.
Can you hear me good now?
Yes, that's all good.
Design oriented. I want to bring up your website so people can see. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Video games. They're still around.
They
Can't
are. We didn't expect them to last this long.
No, it's all good. It's
Yeah,
been a while.
so yeah, what's been going on with you? What have you been working on? What have you been doing?
Yeah, just maintaining the design-oriented community. Just keeping that going. Doing design challenges every day. Doing a lot of experimental, like teaching programs. We did one where for a few months we tried communal drawing. And when I say communal, we have a style of learning that we do here called communal learning. So we try to do as much as we can and learn in groups and have the structure of the group benefit every single member in an interesting way. So we tried to do that with drawing a couple of months ago, earlier this year, and that was a lot of fun. Um, we did the same thing a little bit with language. We do a lot of weird language experiments where we try to teach Japanese, learn Japanese, and probe what the heck's going on with our inability to learn language as well.
So it
We
seems
do a
like
lot of that.
your general interests and career are just like moving more and more towards like learning itself, and it's almost like because I remember you were what was the puzzle sort of game you were working on?
Yeah, enlighten.
Enlighten,
Go
yeah,
ahead and go to designoriented.net. Just straight up.
yeah,
Don't put the
okay.
blog at the
Oh,
end or
okay,
anything.
yeah. Oh, it's loading. Yeah. So that's right. You did the wheel a few years ago. That was super cool. The
Mm.
Discord. I see your Discord is very so there's always stuff going on there. I'm very jealous of your ability to like do community events and have it seems like people are so engaged with what you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people popping in and out, people from all kinds of different stages in game development and also aspiring game designers. So we talk to every single one of them, get to know them a little bit, figure out where their head space is, what they think about games, and always try to give a little help wherever we can.
So now you're not so much in the business of making your own games at this point as much because you're working in AAA, is that right? Or are you
No,
still making your own stuff
so
as well?
I left Gunfire Games,
Oh, you
so now I
did.
am on my own.
When did that happen?
June, so about half a year ago.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. So now you're back on your own. And
Yeah, yeah,
so what's been going on since then? What have I mean you've been amping up this like basically like a teaching. It's almost like a course, right?
yeah. We are refining a lot of things. Plan on going pretty deep into teaching. A lot of our experiments are based around a new learning model and a new teaching model, and then we also try to merge all the principles and lessons we've learned from game design into our curriculum, so that while learning as a group, things are generally more fun and more interesting than you'd find anywhere else. So
Right.
we're heading in that direction. We are developing software, developing apps, and kind of building up our tools before we kind of launch big, hopefully early next year.
Okay, so yeah, let's back up and talk about well, somebody asked in chat like what is design oriented? And
Yeah.
I think that's been maybe changing a little bit over the years, but I think it's always been like some kind of uh it's been like a set of game design theory and related theory kind of like you have a blog and you know those sort of traditional things, but you also have these interesting tools.
hmm
So I don't know, what do you think design oriented is? Like give us the basic gist of your philosophy and what you're about and what design oriented is.
Yeah. Design oriented is a learning community. So, as it says on the site, anyone can kind of check it out. We just focus on game design and related skills. So that also includes like narrative design, and sometimes we dip into like visual design, and every now and then learning languages and things like that. But we teach everything through this communal learning style, and we all of it is backed by all the work that I did on my own personal blog, Critical Gaming. But I stopped writing for that like in 2013, so it's been a long time. We've been running with design oriented sometime after that, and then building these websites, rebranding everything, providing clear tools for people like the wheel you have there. That's a lot of the terminology in our structure that we use here in the community. So everything we do in the community is color coded by these terms. Whenever we talk in the chat, we have ways of cataloging and categorizing what we say according to these terms, and it just helps everything keep organized so we can help people think about games more deeply, more precisely, and then move on from there.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think people also should know that you are a designer. You've designed you know straight up things ranging from straight up like video games, like fighting games,
hmm
and you come out of the fighting game community. That's sort of your background, right? That's where you got your
Yeah,
nickname. Uh,
Smash Brothers. Yeah,
uh-huh.
played Kirby and Melee.
Right. Yeah, and I always talk about Barabari Ball, which to
hmm
me is a very inspirational game. And I hope someday that you maybe come back to that and make some kind of sequel or something. Um,
Yeah, we all hope.
but
The dreams never die.
yeah, yeah. But then you also had Enlighten. Is
Yeah.
that finished or what's the status of that?
So you can go to designoriented.net/enlighten game, and it's just a page that kind of explaining what it is. It was been in open beta for a while. When new people come around and play, you know, I encourage them to play on our Discord channel on stream so we can watch them play, have conversations, talk about what they're thinking and what they're going through, and kind of apply it to any other aspect of life. Because in this game, it is designed to help you learn how you learn. So while the game itself has a bunch of self-contained challenges and tools and information, the real fun is refining your learning technique there and then applying it elsewhere in life. So it's kind of a long, interesting community effort whenever anybody decides to dip into Enlighten. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. People are mentioning in the chat that we have on my Discord a meme that's add a ball to every game, and because like I've said for a while that like you can kind of improve a lot of genres by just adding a ball to it, uh, which I think that's
Volleyball.
yeah that's part of that. Someone was like, is that where the add a ball meme comes from? Bar ball, and like it
That's
kind of
funny.
does, yeah, like
That's hilarious.
yeah. Um, so yeah, Enlighten, is it is are you still working on this or is it like kind of done or is it sort of a is it the sort of thing that you're always going to be adding to kind of?
No, it's my primary goal with it was to test a lot of the tools and ideas and kind of learn more about them. The game itself started as kind of an experiment in that direction, then it kind of turned into a research learning project that's
Hmm.
also a game. So with the weird origins, it kind of made the thing unmarketable, right? It's just neither here nor there. But still, the people who kind of dig into it really enjoy it. That's why I have quotes on the website, right? And um, so we're trying to figure out a way to package it down and make it more game-like and just put it on a platform that seems to match it better.
So,
Uh,
what was this
yeah,
originally intended to be a commercial product?
the original was just to see if I could try some of the tools, and
I
shortly
see.
after that, I'm
That's
like,
what I
why not make
thought.
a game and put it on
Right.
mobile? And then shortly after that, like, wow, I didn't design for mobile from the beginning, so I'll just keep it on PC. Then shortly after that, I'm like, wow, I need to plan better, kind of a thing.
Oh, sure. I feel you on that for sure. 100%. Uh, I also, I basically go like where my curious brain is leading me in terms of design. And then like the fifth thought out is like anything having to do with business or how I could like make money. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So hopefully, whenever there's a grant or an opportunity for it, I just like, hey, maybe this will give me some money to push me over the edge.
Hmm. I
And
mean, your stuff
yeah,
seems very grant worthy, I would say. Like, because it seems very, um, both your community and your this Enlighten in particular seem really like, uh, I don't know, very the kind of thing that I would think grants are for. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Uh,
it's kind of hard when you think, oh, edutainment, edutech, like they should be interested in something like this,
yeah.
or other specific parts of the industry, but it kind of sits oddly in the middle of multiple grant sources, I guess.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Interesting.
I've tried.
I mean, I think the grant situation in the United States is like not super great compared to some European countries is one of the things I've heard. Um, as well, that might also be a difficult factor there. But also, I mean, so are you like do you monetize your like classes, your design classes, and your community events at all, or are those totally
Yeah,
just free to
yeah.
everyone?
Everything's been free forever. It's a terrible, terrible sickness to have. But
Yeah.
we learn, and we've been refining the offerings. Right, a lot of people wanted to own a copy of the my blog that I printed out. It's behind me if you can see that far. If I'm not covering it up,
I can
uh,
see the yeah. Oh,
bookshelf,
nice. Yep.
and it's back there. Some people wanted to print out, and I'm like, I kind of want to rewrite it or clean it up, but then the effort that it would take to do that, I wanted to just rewrite it, and I thought, like, if I do a polish pass on these things, then that's when I'll start selling it, right?
Hmm.
And we're kind of at that point now. So I've been working on some things, but yeah, just everything's will hopefully take it to the next phase starting early 2021.
Nice. Um, do is there a chance of a Richard Terrell fighting game or like something along those lines, like something like super video gamey? Do you see yourself working on something like that in the next few years, or are you feeling like you want to move more and more into kind of like community teaching sort of direction?
Yeah, I'm working on with the startup team, and we're working on a prototype right now. So that's full video game kind of thing
Nice.
that you might expect,
Can you
and
say
that's been
anything more
exciting.
about that?
Probably not.
Shucks.
Probably not. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited about it in any case.
Yeah. Full on video game. People shooting people. That kind of
That's
thing.
yeah. I mean, that's the starting place. You just
Yeah. S- So yeah. So when left to my own devices, I like to lean heavily into communication and teaching and things. But teaming up with other people is a really good way for me to branch out a little bit and move in a different direction.
yeah. That's good. I always tell myself like I want to do more collaboration, and then I
Mhm.
just like don't.
It's so
it,
hard.
it is hard. Yeah. Um. What what are you playing any video games these days, or that are notable for you?
I'm I'm going through my Epic Games free catalog, so just popping into games here and there. Recently started playing Into the Breach.
Hmm.
Played a little bit of 20XX. Played a little bit of Wilmot's Warehouse, and a little
Nice.
bit of The Messenger. So just popping around to all kinds of things, playing
You,
games and catching up.
we played Wilmot's Warehouse. So inspired by you and your Discord, I
Mm,
have a game design book club where
mm,
I try to get it to be like what you have, and it's like it doesn't fly. You know, the problem is my community hates video games. That's why they came to my community, because I hate video games so much, and now they all hate video games too.
look
And
what
so
you did.
I'm like, hey, you guys want to all play this one game? And everyone's like, fuck no, I'm not playing that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been pretty hard to get people to kind of come together and play games. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's kind
I,
of crazy. We too get people that pop into the Discord and they're like, "Hey, I hear there's game discussions." We're like, "Yeah, right over here," and then they go silent. You're like, don't you want to say anything? Don't you want to? I don't know. Like, I can't make you talk, but a lot of people seem to pop into Discords just to lurk. But yeah, there's a whole community there, and I
yeah,
think a lot of people don't know how to talk about video games. We might have talked about this in the past, but the last 5 years and the previous 5 years and the previous 5 years, all very different in terms of what was floating around the gaming discourse. Like, the age of bloggers is dead. You said earlier and today that nobody's reading articles. Um, and now, like, the age of YouTubers and stuff, those kind of video essays are dying because it's just moving to Twitch and live entertainment for a lot of the masses, right?
mm,
Reading reviews and reading like the words in the reviews, not quite so popular anymore. So now we just hit Metacritic, look at a number, and then yell. And then now people aren't even yelling anymore. There's just too many games. Right? Everything just is silent. I think a while ago you said nobody's making bold claims, right? Uh, and I've talked about that recently in my Discord. And I was like, I think Keith was getting at this idea that people used to say things. People used to try to have thoughts, try to make statements, try to understand the world by putting out these statements that are supposed to bear truth. And now everyone's just quiet, multi Twitch streaming, buried underneath their catalog of shame, their pile of shame, and all these new in our new age conversations aren't happening, even though tons of people are playing games and watching games.
well, and part of that is that tons of people are playing games and watching games, but it's like a small number of games soak up so much of the attention and the right, like League of Legends and Fortnite and like I don't know, like maybe 10 other games
Mhm.
like are just the vast majority of all gaming eyeballs and thoughts. And a lot of times they like yeah, there hasn't been as the number of people playing games, the number of hours of spent playing games has risen, the like literacy has not risen with that, you know, and you could say I like what you're saying about like it being feeling kind of silent. Um, I think part of that silence is that we all have these little tiny communities everywhere that are actually rather disconnected. So like for me, I hang out on my Discord and I talk to the people on my Discord and I talk to them a lot. And like we talk a lot, like every day we all chat. But
Mhm.
I don't talk to anyone else at all. Like I post tweets, I guess, but
Mhm.
like I there's not I mean, part of it also, I mean, this feeling may be exacerbated because of like the pandemic and the fact that we don't have GDC and events like those, which were once a year events where you can kind of come together and you sort of feel like there is this community. You get that sort of feeling. It may not be real, but it's like it feels like a community kind of.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it was definitely easier to feel connected when there was a lot less of us and a lot less games, right? Now that everything is so expanded, I think we lost that little bit of cushion, that grace that comes from being a sort of a what is it, a minority in terms of entertainment, and then growing and growing and now overshadowing just about everything else. But
Yeah.
I think it's natural
Hmm.
that our communication circles are small. I think, Twitter and things like that tell us, oh, there's so much out there and you can talk to everybody and all the voices are here, but those don't generate constructive conversations. Those
Right.
don't generate long form, long term conversations where people know you and are part of your growing slash learning. It's just Twitter, like chirps and garbage and links and retweets. That's just about what it is. So we
Right.
try to do the opposite on design oriented, and we find that a lot of people just simply have zero experience with that. I pulled all my experience from, especially with games, from playing at daycare when I was like 3 years old, and we gathered around an NES, and then playing with my brother all the time, then playing as a group, and then playing with friends because there was no internet play, and then getting internet play and trying to keep a lot of that going. uh, that was just about the time Smash Brothers tournament scene with Melee. We started growing it in Texas, and those were long car rides to play just a few hours, maybe at some random person's house, just to say hey, just to spread the joy of playing Smash Brothers. So that's where our roots are. That's what we know,
Mm.
and a lot of other people don't even know that that's something they can expect or get or want or
Mm.
need, and it just silence. It's so weird.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to think about like something like Smash Brothers or any fighting game for that matter,
Hmm.
and how they are a inherently social thing where you're sitting next to somebody and you're having this night with someone and you're just sitting and playing Smash Brothers, and you compare that to like I don't know League of Legends or something where you know a lot of times it's just like mute everybody. I do not want to. Whoa, nice! Wow, you're all about these Donkey Kong uh,
Aesthetic.
things. That's awesome. I like the wall art. That's super cool.
Mm.
Do you play Donkey Kong, or it's just more like of you honor Donkey Kong?
Yeah, it's more like honoring it. I haven't played it much at all. My blog had the same thing on its
I
background.
remember that. Yeah.
The whole idea there was the metal beaming scaffolding was like the backbone to build Super Mario Brothers on top of. So
Hmm.
you could see like elements of Super Mario Brothers being fitted onto these metal beams and stuff. And it's like, oh, underneath every game there's more game and there's structure and structure. That was the basic theme. So I've been running with the whole Donkey Kong thing for a while.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Though, so somebody said rip Smash community with the pandemic, and
Yeah.
it's like it's not even just Smash community. It's like yeah, it's like all fighting games and also all like same room co-op games. My friend worked on Killer Queen Black, which is the sequel to Killer Queen, and it's a primarily designed for same room multiplayer couch co-op kind of game. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, that you can't play those anymore. I mean, similar board games also. I'm a fan of tabletop games, and those you can't really do
Hmm.
as much. Board game nights. Yeah, so I see what you mean about the silence kind of thing. It's pretty. And I think what we have to do is we have to like build a new thing. And I think that's what kind of you're doing with your community. Um, is build a new space, right? And humans adapt, and they come up with new ways to find those connections and build those social situations where people can actually communicate, right? As opposed to Twitter.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think we're all in the process of sort of building that and trying to figure out what that's going to look like and how we can do that. A lot more people are playing D&D on over Zoom or whatever. I think that's like massively on the rise as an example.
Yeah.
So there are some like silver linings, I think, that we're starting to figure things out. And then it's almost like feels like though, like we have to like restart everything in terms of like getting to like a game design literacy or even a games
Yeah.
literacy.
That is interesting. I look at and listen to, like, my mom's a teacher, and I know people that are currently trying to teach here in the pandemic, during the pandemic, and so many people are worried about the state of the education for the kids and what they're losing in this pandemic, how hard it is to teach, how many people you can't reach because they don't have technology, all kinds of problems that we weren't ready for, essentially. But even then, I take a step back and I'm thinking, okay, I know we've dropped from where we were, but where can we be, right? Like,
Mm,
what is the quality of education that we want for our kids? And was school doing that for them? How many was it doing it for? Those are the kind of questions that, we talk about every day. And just trying to get to the root of it, because I feel like the root of understanding how to, make an impression on people, how to communicate ideas and experience with people is just the root of all art anyway. some people use video games, some people paint, some people do music, but essentially a lot of what you're doing at a fundamental level is just trying to put information in people's heads and potentially change their lives.
Yeah, and that's when you first started talking about your community and the things you're doing, and I peek in there once in a while and I see what's going on, and I was like, because everyone has known that like the way we do education, in the modern era, just public education, typical education is just it's obviously out of date. It's like so
Yeah.
comically out of date, and it didn't work for me. I mean, I dropped out of high school. I was like a total screw up all through my
Aw.
primary education. And because it didn't engage me, it didn't interest me, it didn't like operate on my level. And I'm just thinking about like there are probably like younger people, I don't know how young, but there are definitely younger people who like come to a Discord like yours, and it's a very formative experience, I think, to like to have someone who's like really engaging with them, and especially someone like yourself who's like very I think you're a really good communicator, and you really care about learning and engaging with people on their own level and their own terms. I think it's one of the only reasons you were able to like talk to me at my most brash and annoying level, because you're able to like kind of live in someone else's aesthetic, and hear someone else in a way that a lot of people I think can't. And so I think that makes you a very good teacher and a very good communicator.
Yeah, that reminds me of an old article from back in the old days, 2013, May 2nd. You had me on your podcast. We chatted, or maybe it's just like a phone chat. But we had this conversation about games, game design, and all these things. And then afterwards, I made this like interactive presentation,
I
formalizing our
remember
game
that.
design.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link right here. It's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah. Please do.
But definitely having a difficult time like seeing eye to eye and communicating, and then me afterwards going like, well, what happened in that conversation? I don't know. Let me try to map it out with visuals and interactivity, just trying really hard to try hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just really investing in everyone who was present in that community at that time. There's a little grapho thing.
Yeah, look at this. It's so intricate.
Yeah, it even plays like your voice, and it's like, this is when we talked about this, and it kind of zooms around for fun. But
Wow.
yeah, trying hard. Like, there were so few bloggers back then,
Yeah,
roughly 10, 20 maybe.
I know.
Uh, and then we would all kind of know about each other, and we met at GDC. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you,
for
you had
sure.
on your show today, you had Frank Lantz, Raph Koster, and Dan Z, and
Mm-hmm.
all of them have given me advice and helped me out along the ways, just kind of mentoring me as I'm going crazy. And Frank Lance always is like, "You're never making money with all this stuff. Why don't you think about a business?" I'm like, "Never. I don't understand how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing." But always encouraging me. It's been great.
Yeah. Um Awesome. Well, any things you want to plug or anything? I've been going since for like the last 5.5 hours, so
Yeah.
I'm about out of energy. But I do want to give you an opportunity to like just say anything you want to say, or talk about plug anything you want to plug.
hmm
Uh, what else you got?
Yeah. So game design is really complicated. There's so many moving pieces to both better understanding how we learn, better understanding game design. We do a lot of it on our Discord, and it's really you get everything that you put into it. So like we meet people, we match with their energy, we play their games, we read their articles, we do it all for free. And especially considering how many professionals we have in here, uh, that's a huge resource that people aren't taking advantage of. So I'm like, okay. Uh, but beyond that, for anyone who's listening, if you are really interested in having sort of a really unique experience, understanding how you learn and a little bit of game design at the same time, my game Enlighten is open beta. It's free and everything. Plays on PC primarily, and if you put a little bit of time into it, if you want to chat with me about it, if you want to play and stream at the same time, definitely everybody who's played it, and put the time into it has had so many positive life-changing experiences from it. Just fundamentally changing the way you think about learning will affect every single other part of your life. So if that's something you're curious about, go ahead and jump in. Keith knows where I am. I know where I am. Discord is all from the website. And I'd love to watch you play.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever see yourself writing a book?
Yeah. So what's cool about the way I grew up with media and stuff, like I love books and I love film and TV and every single medium, including games and then beyond, right? So if it doesn't suit a book, I don't dream about writing it. And I've dreamed up a couple of books that I think would be really like best in book format. Things that you can like write in, draw in, keep track of, like really engage with the material.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a couple of books planned,
Nice.
and I've done a lot with video, and I'm gonna do more with interactive teaching in the future, building things that help teach, kind of like Nikki Case's explorables and things like that. Moving in that direction and just making sure that if I make something in a medium, it's suited for that medium. That'd be great. So yeah, books are coming, new website overhauls coming, really cool things down the line. So it's a great time to jump in now.
Also, Raph Koster messaged me about 20 minutes ago and said, "Tell Kirby Kid hello," smiley face.
Hey, shout outs to Raph. All the cool people here.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Bye. I'm going to wrap up the show. But yeah, everyone go check out Kirby Kid and everything that Richard's doing. Yeah, we'll have you on again, the podcast, I'm sure at some point. You're kind of like a regular guest. You actually came on my old podcast. I had a podcast before my current one. You were one of the only, I think I didn't have many guests on for that one, but you were one of them. So definitely that'll happen again, and keep me posted on what you're working on.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye. Okay, everybody. Well, this has been the 5-year anniversary show of what's it called? The Clockwork Game Design Podcast / the Clockwork Game Dev Show. One thing I will say, I've missed streaming. I haven't been streaming as much recently, and so I think I'm going to start back my regular schedule. 5-year anniversary for what's it called? Yeah, and I should get more guests going on like that. That was pretty cool. But it was also nice that it was like this, big event. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it went. Let's see. Let me just catching up on chat a little bit here. Underneath every game is UO. I mean, it's kind of true. I do think that, like the ultimate video game kind of, sort of, is like the Matrix or the holodeck or whatever. That like when someone came up with the idea of making a game on the computer, that like the natural conclusion of that is something like a fantasy world simulation on some level. But I also am a game designer and I want to make things that are like, because I also think like actually just the Matrix is just like, oh, I guess let's make a card game in the Matrix now. So it's a little more complicated, but anyways, yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap up, go get some dinner. Thank you so much for coming by, everybody. We had so many viewers. We had like 40 something viewers at some point. I've never had more than 15 viewers before, so that's pretty cool too. You can support my work and my show at I'll put the link in here, www.patreon.com/KeithBurgun. That's my Patreon. You can become a supporter of my work, all the stuff that I do, game design-y stuff, this show. Also, you can get access to my new game, Gem Wizards Tactics, which I haven't even showed you, but it's real and it exists. And it's a game. And let's see, do I have time to show you it? Not really, but it is real. That much I can say for sure. I've been doing so much. It's like kind of in the middle of like a ton of improvements and advancements right now. But anyway, you can get access to it. It's a turn-based tactical game. It's a little bit like Cantata, but it's more, it's really about the combat entirely. There's no base building, and it's all about emergent, complex, weird things that happen in the combat. and also weird factions. We're gonna have a lot of factions eventually, and yeah, the Matrix is a card game within the Matrix. Could be. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out, everybody, and I'll be back on Monday. And of course, you can always join me on the Discord. All that stuff can be found at keithburgun.net. And yeah, see you next time.